The freezing rain lashed against the cracked windshield of David's battered Ford pickup truck, each strike sounding like a gavel coming down on his life. For 3 years, David had been fighting an uphill battle against a world that seemed determined to break him, working double shifts at the local warehouse just to keep a roof over his 7-year-old son's head. He was a man living on the razor's edge of exhaustion, his hands permanently stained with grease and his heart heavy with the fear that one more stroke of bad luck would take away the only thing he had left. Tonight was supposed to be a rare celebration, a modest birthday dinner for his son. But as he navigated the desolate, unlit backroads of rural Ohio, the headlights caught a flash of bright red, and a pair of tiny, terrified faces huddled in the ditch next to a luxury SUV that had slid off the embankment. If this story reminds you that even in our darkest moments, a single act of kindness can change the course of destiny, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a reminder of hope, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share these powerful stories of second chances and the human spirit. David pulled his truck to a jarring halt, the engine groaning as it idled in the storm. He didn't think about his own exhaustion or the fact that he was already late for his son. He only saw 2 young girls, identical twins no older than 9, shivering violently in the downpour. Their father's SUV was half submerged in a muddy ravine, the driver's side door jammed against a tree, leaving the man inside unconscious, and the girls trapped outside in elements. As David scrambled down the muddy slope, his boots slipping on the slick grass, he felt a surge of adrenaline that pushed aside the ache in his back. He reached the girls first, stripping off his own worn work jacket, the only warm layer he had, to wrap around both of them, pulling them into the shelter of his arms as they sobbed into his chest. The rescue was a blur of frantic motion and whispered prayers. David managed to use a heavy tire iron for his truck to pry the SUV's passenger door open just enough to reach the unconscious man, whose breathing was shallow and ragged. With a strength born of desperation, David hauled the man out of the wreckage, dragging him up the embankment inch by agonizing inch while the twin girls clung to each other at the top of the hill. He loaded all 3 of them into the cramped, heater-blasted cab of his pickup, ignoring the mud ruining his seats and the flickering oil light on his dashboard. He drove like a man possessed toward the nearest hospital, keeping one hand on the steering wheel and the other reaching back to pat the girls' knees, telling them over and over that they were safe now, that everything would be okay, even though he didn't know if his own life would ever be okay again. At the hospital, David stayed just long enough to see the girls swept into the arms of nurses and to watch the doctors rush their father into surgery. He didn't give his full name, only a quiet nod to the intake clerk before slipping back out into the rain. He was a man who lived in the shadows of society, someone who had learned that drawing too much attention usually led to questions about his past or his precarious financial situation. He returned home to find his son asleep on the sofa, a cold plate of macaroni and cheese waiting on the table, and David sat in the dark, weeping quietly from pure exhaustion. He had no idea that the man he had saved was Judge Thomas Sterling, the most formidable legal mind in the county, and the very person who was scheduled to preside over David's final custody hearing the following Tuesday, a hearing where a predatory debt collection agency was attempting to prove David was an unfit provider due to his poverty. The day of the hearing arrived with a sky the color of slate. David sat in the back of the courtroom, his suit jacket 3 sizes too large and fraying at the cuffs, feeling the crushing weight of the legal system pressing down on him. Across the aisle sat the lawyers in their $1,000 suits, ready to argue that a man who worked 90 hours a week but still couldn't afford a new car was a failure. David's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. When the bailiff called the room to order, the side door opened and Judge Sterling walked in. The judge's head was bandaged and he moved with a slight limp, but his eyes were sharp and piercing. As he took his seat at the bench, his gaze swept the room, pausing for a split second on David's face. David looked down at his hands, certain that the judge saw only another statistic, another desperate father about to lose his world. The opposing counsel began their assault, painting a picture of David's life that made his struggles look like negligence. They spoke of the late rent payments, the aging truck, and the lack of a stable support system. David felt the walls closing in, the hope he had tried so hard to maintain finally flickering out. But then, Judge Sterling did something unprecedented. He held up a hand to silence the lawyer mid-sentence. The courtroom fell into a deafening silence as the judge leaned forward, his eyes fixed intently on David. He reached into his robes and pulled out a small, mud-stained scrap of fabric, a piece of the work jacket David had used to wrap the twins on that freezing night. The judge's voice was thick with an emotion that no one in that room had ever heard from him before, as he spoke about a man who didn't hesitate to give his only coat to strangers, a man who risked his life for a family he didn't know, and a man who had left the hospital without asking for a single dime or a moment of recognition. Judge Sterling revealed to the shocked courtroom that his daughters, Grace and Lily, hadn't stopped talking about the angel in the old truck who had saved them. He spoke of how he had spent the last 3 days searching for the owner of the vehicle that had been caught on the hospital's grainy security footage. The judge looked directly at David, tears welling in his eyes, and told the court that a man's worth is not measured by the balance in his bank account or the shine on his car, but by the depth of his character when no one is watching. He declared that a father who teaches his son the value of selflessness by living it is the most fit provider he had ever encountered in his 30 years on the bench. The debt collection case was not just dismissed. The judge went further, noting a series of legal technicalities that would protect David's home and wages from further harassment. The narrative of David's life shifted in that singular, breathtaking moment. The struggle that had defined his existence for 3 years began to dissolve, replaced by a sense of peace he hadn't felt since before his wife passed away. After the hearing, in the quiet hallway outside the courtroom, Judge Sterling approached David not as a superior, but as a fellow father. He shook David's callous hand, his grip firm and grateful. He offered David a position managing the maintenance of the county's fleet of vehicles, a job with a living wage, benefits, and a dignity David had earned 1,000 times over. But more than the job, the judge offered friendship that bridged the gap between their two worlds, a bond forged in the mud of a roadside ditch and sealed in the sanctuary of justice. As the months passed, David's son and the Sterling twins became inseparable friends, their laughter filling the yard of the modest but sturdy house David was finally able to call his own. The memories of the cold nights and the fear of the gavel began to fade, replaced by the warmth of community that now saw David for who he truly was. He remained a man of few words, still working hard and still wearing his heart on his sleeve, but he no longer walked with his head down. He had learned that the universe has a mysterious way of returning the light we give out, even when we think we are flickering in the wind. On the anniversary of the accident, David sat on his porch, watching the sunset, knowing that his son was safe, his future was secure, and that his life was a testament to the fact that no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever truly lost. Please leave a comment below with the word justice if this story brought a tear to your eye and reminded you that good people still exist in this world. The transformation of David's life was a slow, beautiful blooming that touched everyone in their small town. He became a symbol of resilience, a man who had faced the worst of the world and responded with the best of himself. Judge Sterling often remarked that David hadn't just saved his life that night. He had saved his soul, reminding him that the law is nothing without mercy, and that true power lies in the hands of those who serve others. Every time David looks at his son, he sees a boy who is proud of his father, not for what he owns, but for who he is. The story of the single dad and the judge became a local legend, a reminder that we are all connected by threads of fate that we rarely see, and that a single choice to be kind can ripple out to change the world forever. If this story touched your heart and moved you to tears, please engage with this video by hitting the like button and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps us bring more of these emotional and inspiring journeys to life. Thank you for watching.